What's up, house groups? You're probably wondering why I'm wearing a Christmas shirt, and the answer is simple. Ned Forster is appropriate attire 365 days a year. I'll stand on that. Just kidding. We're doing Christmas planning at Revision this week, so I had to get into the spirit of the season. This week also was the kickoff to a new series called Ancient Paths that's built on God's advice in Jeremiah 6:16. Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths where the good way is and walk in it, and you will find rest for your souls. And we kicked off the series this Sunday by talking about the ancient path to the good way, the one that leads to rest for our souls, called Solitude and Silence. And let's be real, that's wildly countercultural in 2025. We live in a world where we are bombarded with noise and distraction. We have access to the entire world in our pockets. So like every podcast ever recorded, every song ever written is just constantly playing somewhere. This is a world our ancestors never could have even dreamed of. And yet for all the advancements, the question is, what is this world, with all of its noise and its busyness, doing to our souls? Is it making them healthier? Is it making us more human, more alive? Or is something inside us wilting on the vine of our culture? I was talking to a buddy last week who mentioned how toxic social media has become, how it's built to cultivate more and more and more radical echo chambers that make us outraged enough to just keep doom scrolling. And he's trying to actively retrain his algorithm to show him less lies, less anger, less echo chambery opinions, and more like good and happy things for the sake of his soul. And honestly, I was like, that's not a bad idea, man, for like any of us. Because our information overload and our instant access, and even more than that, our constant accessibility is doing something to our humanity. On Sunday, I mentioned an article that Andrew Sullivan wrote for New York Magazine where he called distraction our culture's specific weakness, and said that even as our minds shapeshift under the pressure of distraction, its greatest threat is to our souls. That's a really powerful thought, and I actually love the title of the article. It's called I Used to Be a Human Being. Like, I wonder how many of us could sit back and look at our lives right now and say, whew, I used to be a human being, but I don't know how much I feel like one anymore. You guys, our culture is so busy and so loud, it's now normal for us to live with constant low-grade anxiety. And something like silence and solitude, which used to be normal, now makes us uncomfortable. But as we look at the ancient paths that brought life to those who went before us, and even more than that, as we look at Jesus, who showed us what it looks like to be fully and completely who God made us to be as human beings, it becomes clear. We need space to be alone with the Creator who created us to connect with Him. There's no getting around this. Without solitude, our souls starve. Without silence, we forget who we are. We keep running and going and chasing more, gaining the whole world, but losing our souls in the process. But Jesus showed us a better way. Even in the middle of busyness, He stepped away regularly and repeatedly to sit alone and be present with the Father. And in the silence and the solitude, His cup was filled so He could go back out into the world and pour Himself out for the sake of others. I'm convinced of this. Jesus' ability to be fully present with the people around Him was built on His intentionality in making sure He was regularly present with the Father. And you guys, for us, for you and me, the same thing is true. We have to be with Jesus to be like Jesus, and there's no getting around it. The less present with Him we are, the less present we're ever going to have the capacity to be with the people around us. Because, I mean, that busy, noisy stuff leaves us burnt out and living in the low-grade anxiety that ultimately cuts us off from God. And all the other voices that fill our lives drown out the still, small voice of God. And when we're not hearing from Him, we feel distant from Him. And that distance creates the conditions for the world to be all messed up. There's a theologian called Paul Tillich who argued that the underlying cause of all sin, all pain, and all brokenness in the world is our felt existential estrangement from God. Like, we settle for the ways of the world because we feel cut off from Him. And we cause hurt to ourselves and to everyone else because something in our souls, whether we realize it or not, knows that it's estranged from our Creator. We're living smack dab in the middle of a culture that is existentially estranged from its source. And like, this is the consequences. The busyness, the craziness, the burnout, the anxiety. It's real personally and society. And so the question is, what do we do with that? Well, we decide that what was a necessity for Jesus cannot be a luxury for us. And we counterculturally choose to make space for silence and solitude in our lives so that we can hear the voice of a God who still speaks in the middle of all this noise. On Sunday, I gave us 3 simple steps for that. PPP, place, period, plan. Find somewhere, sometime, and somehow to make this happen. And I'd encourage you to make silence and solitude like a rule of life for you. And here's what I mean by rule of life, because evangelicals hear rule and think like, works righteousness, there's more rules. Not rules. Rule comes from the Latin word regula, which means structure, like a trellis that you set up so a vine can grow and flower and be beautiful. In our lives, there are structures we set up. There are habits and routines we all commit to that allow us to flourish and grow. And I think silence and solitude, as difficult as it is, has to be one of those structures and habits. If we're going to recapture that part of what it means to be human, that is presence and connection. And also, if we're going to become all we were made to be, because we're hearing and being shaped by the voice of God. So let's do it.